What if the greatest truths about our existence aren't found in textbooks, but in the quiet torment of our own hearts? What if the anxiety you feel late at night, that heavy aching restlessness, is not a flaw to be fixed, but a signpost to something deeper? Something essential about being human. In the vast realm of foreign philosophy, few thinkers have dared to stare into the abyss of human despair and wrest meaning from it. But one name stands out not for his answers, but for his courageous questions: Soren Kierkegaard. He didn't try to soothe the chaos within us. He invited us to dive into it, to let it teach us, transform us. Born in 1813 in the quaint fog-draped city of Copenhagen, Denmark, Kierkegaard would grow to become one of the most enigmatic and influential figures in Western thought. From the beginning, he was surrounded by an atmosphere thick with contemplation. His father, a devout and deeply philosophical man, often engaged in long, passionate discussions about life, God, and mortality. These weren't just idle musings, they were seeds planted deep in the fertile soil of a young mind already sensitive to the world's invisible tensions. Kierkegaard pursued philosophy and theology at the University of Copenhagen, hoping perhaps to find meaning through the well-worn pages of scholars past. But instead of clarity, he found a kind of sterile detachment. The intellectual works he encountered seemed distant, too abstract, too clinical, removed from the gritty, painful, beautiful messiness of actual life. He wasn't interested in philosophy for philosophy's sake. He wanted something that spoke to the lived experience, to the anguish, joy, doubt, and contradiction that define human existence. This disillusionment became the fertile ground upon which he built his revolutionary body of work. Rather than walking the straight and rational path of academic philosophy, Kierkegaard turned inward toward the raw and unresolved inner world that he believed all humans carry within them. One of Kierkegaard's most groundbreaking contributions is his exploration of angst, a term that has since echoed through existential thought, music, film, and psychology. In his landmark work, The Concept of Anxiety, he doesn't define it as a mental illness or a temporary emotional disturbance. Instead, he paints it as something sacred, even sublime, a fundamental aspect of the human condition. Imagine standing on the edge of a cliff, staring into the vast emptiness below. No one is pushing you, and yet you feel the dizzying potential that you could jump that freedom, terrifying and exhilarating all at once. That's angst. It's not fear of a specific thing. It's the raw awareness of possibility, of uncertainty, of the boundless expanse of life and death, and meaning that stretches out before us. To Kierkegaard, angst is what happens when consciousness awakens, when we realize that we are free. And with that freedom comes a burden, the responsibility to choose to act, to live with consequence. It is a uniquely human phenomenon, one that arises precisely because we are self-aware, capable of asking, who am I and what am I to do? Anxiety is the dizziness of freedom. This simple yet haunting sentence captures Kierkegaard's view that anxiety isn't an enemy to be vanquished, but a sign that we are awake, aware, and alive. Our lives are not scripted. At every moment, we are called to make choices, and those choices matter. But freedom, as Kierkegaard knew all too well, is not easy. It is overwhelming. It means that we are not only the architects of our lives, but also the ones who must bear the weight of every brick laid, every wall built, every doorway passed through or ignored. The sheer scale of possibility of all that could be can paralyze us. We live in a time of unprecedented options. We can choose what to believe, where to live, whom to love, what to do. But with each option comes a question: what if I choose wrong? What if this path leads not to fulfillment, but to regret? Kierkegaard recognized this dilemma long before modern psychology gave it labels. He saw it not as a glitch in the human psyche, but as the defining struggle of our existence. While many view anxiety as something to suppress or escape, Kierkegaard took a radically different stance. He believed that anxiety could be transformative, even redemptive, if we learn to face it rather than flee from it. Instead of drowning in despair, Kierkegaard suggested that we let anxiety sharpen our awareness, deepen our convictions, and lead us toward authentic living. In fact, he believed that anxiety was the very thing that could push us out of complacency and into a more passionate, purpose-filled life. And this is where Kierkegaard introduces another crucial element of his thought: passion. Passion for Kierkegaard is not just emotion, it is a commitment, a fire that animates the soul. It is the engine of authenticity, the force that drives us to pursue what truly matters, even when the world offers no guarantees. Whether it's love, faith, art, vocation, or moral conviction, passion is what gives life its meaning. But here's the twist. Kierkegaard doesn't define passion by external achievement or societal recognition. What matters most is that it aligns with what he called subjective truth. Unlike the cold, universal truths of science or logic, subjective truth is intensely personal. It's the truth that feels like it was written just for you, not because it can be proven, but because it resonates in your bones. Kierkegaard famously wrote, "The crucial thing is to find a truth which is truth for me, to find the idea for which I am willing to live and die." This search for personal truth requires a leap of faith, a radical commitment to live according to what feels deeply authentically real, even when it can't be objectively justified. It means stepping away from the crowd, from the safety of consensus, and into the wilderness of your own inner convictions. This isn't easy. It demands courage. It demands a willingness to be misunderstood, even ridiculed. But Kierkegaard believed that only through this leap can we find a life that is truly our own, not borrowed, not inherited, but chosen. In today's hyper-connected, algorithm-driven world, where opinions are mass-produced and meaning is outsourced to influencers and trends, Kierkegaard's call to authenticity rings more urgently than ever. He challenges us to stop living on autopilot, to stop numbing ourselves with distractions, and instead to ask the hard questions. What am I living for? What truth am I willing to suffer for? He knew that anxiety would come, that it always does when we begin to awaken. But he also knew that within that anxiety lies a doorway to transformation. So the next time you feel that strange inner ache, that quiet trembling in the soul, don't rush to silence it. Listen, lean in, let it teach you something. Perhaps that anxiety is not your enemy, but your greatest ally. Perhaps, just perhaps, it's the dizziness of freedom calling you to become who you truly are. In the previous part, we explored how Kierkegaard viewed anxiety not as an obstacle to be avoided, but as a necessary experience, one that forces us to face the deepest truths about ourselves. Now let's delve deeper into what happens when we ignore that call and let anxiety control us instead. Anxiety, when rooted in our innermost values, those personal meanings we cling to even when no one else understands them, can take hold of our thoughts and emotions like a silent storm. It becomes a paralyzing force, not because it screams, but because it whispers doubts in moments of decision. It makes us hesitate, second guess, and ultimately delay the actions we know we should take. And over time, that hesitation creates a shadow, one that slowly dims our motivation, clouds our judgment, and distances us from the vibrant experience of being truly alive. Kierkegaard believed that surrendering to this state, allowing anxiety to stall us, leads to despair. Not the dramatic kind we see in movies, but a quieter, more insidious despair. A fragmentation of the self, a disconnection from purpose, a slow fading of one's inner clarity. He understood that left unchecked, anxiety doesn't just unsettle us, it consumes us. It doesn't merely pause our progress, it imprisons us in inaction. We start living in hesitation. Our potential decisions become delayed indefinitely, and with each missed opportunity, our sense of self erodes just a little more. We begin to feel stuck, unsure of how to move forward, and terrified of the consequences of any choice. But Kierkegaard challenges us not to run from anxiety, but to walk straight into it, to face it, feel it, and act anyway. Because it's in that very act of confronting anxiety that we reclaim our agency. We begin to recognize a profound truth that anxiety, uncomfortable as it is, can be a compass, a signal pointing us toward areas in need of change or courage. Instead of running from the uncertainty, we can use it as a torch, lighting the dark corridors of our inner lives, revealing where growth is waiting for us. At the heart of Kierkegaard's philosophy lies this: the path to selfhood is paved not with easy answers, but with leaps of faith. To become ourselves, we must first learn to move forward, even when everything within us wants to freeze. Self-realization demands that we resist the urge to conform, to seek distractions, or to numb our discomfort. It asks that we engage fully with the questions we'd rather avoid. Growth doesn't happen in comfort. It happens in risk, in stepping outside the known, in embracing the terrifying unpredictability of life, not to conquer it, but to move within it with honesty and resolve. Kierkegaard knew this journey wouldn't be comfortable. He warned us that the pursuit of selfhood would mean regularly brushing up against the raw edges of existence. the fear of failure, the confusion of choice, the pain of uncertainty. But it is in precisely those moments that transformation begins. When we willingly engage with anxiety rather than hide from it, we step into a process of self-exploration and self-transcendence. We begin to see our fears not as enemies, but as invitations, challenges that call forth our deepest truths and highest potentials. But this process requires more than just courage. It requires authenticity, a commitment to our own truth even when the world urges us to become something else. Society, Kierkegaard observed, often pressures us to conform, to play roles, follow scripts, and meet expectations that might not align with our inner selves. And in doing so, we risk losing sight of who we truly are. To find meaning, we must resist that pressure. We must refuse to shape ourselves into what others deem acceptable and instead honor what feels real, true, and alive within us. That might mean taking unconventional paths, making unpopular decisions, or daring to dream differently, but it's the only way to stay connected to our inner compass. Conformity, Kierkegaard warned, is a quiet thief. It doesn't steal your life all at once. It takes little pieces, your passion, your purpose, your voice, until you no longer recognize yourself. True self-discovery lies beyond its grip. It lies in venturing into the unknown and allowing ourselves to fully feel the richness of our own lived experience. And yet, there's another danger that often goes unnoticed: escapism. Kierkegaard cautioned against using distractions to soothe our anxiety without confronting its source. Whether it's constant entertainment, compulsive busyness, or substance use, these diversions can create the illusion of comfort while quietly undermining our growth. He urged us to practice introspection instead, to turn inward and examine the roots of our desires, fears, and motivations. By doing so, we don't just cope with anxiety, we learn from it. We begin to uncover our authentic selves and the paths that feel most aligned with who we truly are. Kierkegaard emphasized the value of solitude and silence, of carving out time for stillness, reflection, and contemplation. In those quiet spaces, we can finally hear the truths our busyness often drowns out. We can confront our doubts with honesty and make choices that reflect our values rather than our fears. Through this deep inner work, we gain something invaluable: self-awareness, a clear-eyed understanding of who we are, what we need, and how we want to live. We discover our unique gifts, those abilities or passions that no one else can express in quite the same way. And as we begin to share them with the world, we step more fully into our purpose. In the end, Kierkegaard invites us to look at anxiety not as a flaw to fix, but as a fundamental part of what it means to be human. Yes, it's uncomfortable. Yes, it's confusing, but it can also be deeply meaningful. It signals that we are standing on the threshold of something important, something worth leaning into rather than retreating from. So instead of waiting for life to become perfectly safe or completely clear, Kierkegaard challenges us to act, to take that leap, to choose meaning over fear, authenticity over comfort, and courage over conformity. Because in doing so, we don't just survive anxiety, we transform through it. And in the process, we become more whole, more alive, and more fully ourselves.